Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a promotional video that the government have released via the Cabinet Office, which has been thrown out to promote, all that lovely bureaucracy that Brexit has given us. You know, that bureaucracy that Brexiteers, like Boris Johnson himself, said that we would have much less of if we voted to leave the EU. Well, turns out it's going to be a hell of a lot more. But don't worry, because it's actually fantastic. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this weekend, just gone, there was yet another surreal moment on the Brexit journey, because bureaucracy, so-called red tape, has throughout my life generally been accepted, in this country at least, I imagine it's the same in most other countries, as being something to be universally despised. Yes, people sometimes understand the importance of it, but we still hate doing it. And quite a lot of the time, we don't even see the point of doing it. We just say this is a form that's just going to go on a shelf and no one will ever read it. And for many years, the EU was blamed for bombarding us with an epic amount of this red tape. Oddly, no one could actually really point any out. But apparently there was an awful lot of it, and it was all the EU's fault. And if we leave the EU, we can streamline everything. There'll be less bureaucracy, fewer bureaucrats. Except, of course, as it turns out, the purpose of the EU is to massively reduce the amount of bureaucracy needed to carry out various tasks. And so the reality of Brexit, of course, was always going to be rather different to the boasting. And sure enough, the government have embarked on a process of hiring tens of thousands of new bureaucrats in order to check all the lovely extra bureaucracy that many people are going to have to fill in, somehow fit into their working day. And once the government completes this process of hiring, because I'm not entirely sure where we are with it. Every time I sort of see some MPs say to Michael Gove, who is the minister in charge, so where are we with this hiring of 50,000 new bureaucrats then? He doesn't seem to know. When I say he doesn't seem to know, he uses the words I don't know. So I'm guessing he doesn't know. But when the process is complete at any rate, we will be in the rather impressive situation of having more bureaucrats in the UK specifically to deal with EU trade than the entire EU has to deal with the same jobs for over 24 countries. Now, that is a special sort of genius right there. I mean, if you are going to somehow spin employing way more bureaucrats because of Brexit and try and make out that all the extra bureaucracy is actually a benefit, I mean, you may as well go for it. So the government have put out a video promoting the idea. They're not trying to hide it. They're promoting how great it is that we are now going to be having to deal with way more red tape. So much more, in fact, that we're having to employ loads more bureaucrats. The video, which is just really a couple of slides and a link, was tweeted out with the message, "We are committed to growing the customs sector for EU trade in 2021. And, well, what is the customs sector? Paperwork. They're actually boasting about increasing the amount of paperwork because the boosting various sectors would be a good thing. If we boosted our automotive sector, for example, that would be a good thing. Any of our manufacturing sectors would be a good thing. So it's trying to use that same sort of language, but boosting the customs sector, we don't make money from that. That's just extra paperwork. We're spending money on it. And of course, the paperwork doesn't come cheap for anyone, because importers and hauliers will have to spend money on completing them, both in fees as well as labour. They need people to be able to fill them in, and smaller operators who won't be able to afford to employ people to do that themselves will have to contract it out. So that means, of course, that their services will cost more. That, you know, they will have greater expenses, so they'll have to charge more. That means that the goods that they ship will have to cost more. So for imports, what that means is we will have to pay for more of those goods that we have to import. And for exports, well, technically the reverse would be true of the other side, except, of course, you know, in the EU, there's a much larger market, single market, you may have heard of it, which means there's a much greater chance that maybe someone would be able to find the same product or the same sort of thing or the same service at a lower price within their market. So in other words, it makes quite a lot of the exports less competitive. So businesses will go under, jobs will be lost. Then, of course, there's that army of bureaucrats that the government is employing. I gather they need paying. So that means we need to raise more money to pay for that as well. Some of which, of course, I suppose will come from the fees being charged of hauliers and importers. Now, I'm not opposed to extra revenue being generated via taxes or whatever other means as a way of creating job growth. But the problem is that the overall package is a net reduction in jobs and we're paying extra for it. So let's go through the key messages in the video itself. There are two. So the video begins, at the end of this year, we will have full control of our borders. Right. Okay. Couple of points there. First of all, obviously, we already had full control of our borders. Now, EU countries demonstrated this very ably earlier this year when they restricted and even closed completely borders that they had, even with other EU countries, as part of what they thought were the best measures of containing the coronavirus pandemic. Now, we did not do this in the UK. You know, we didn't even have stations as people came into the country to check temperatures or anything like that. Even now, technically we do have the stations, but it always amazes me. Actually, I don't know why it amazes me. When you'll see people taking photographs of these at airports and they can see the station completely unmanned. So there are times at least when people are coming through those airports when they are not even staffed. But anyway. So the question becomes, so we knew we could actually control our borders as it was. Why didn't the EU restrict or control our borders in some way in order to restrict the spread of coronavirus or the entry of it into the country? And the reason, of course, is Brexit, because the government didn't want to do this whilst we were still in the transition period because it would expose the lie about border control. I mean, if we could do that while still following EU rules, hang on a minute, couldn't we always control our border then? They didn't really want to make it obvious, I suppose. Much better to try and claim that we couldn't because of EU rules, even though other EU countries were doing it themselves. I suppose a lot of people may not have been aware of that. Then there's the second point, which is that actually we are going to have less control of our borders. Because Michael Gove, the minister in charge of Brexit, has confirmed that our border control systems will not be in place for January. So at the moment, we have systems and we're not going to for January. In addition, so you have to consider, obviously we're not taking facilities away, but you consider the other side of it. Because there's a few Brexiteers recently have come to the realisation that a border has two sides. Does it? How interesting. So the help that we would normally get, or that we do at the moment, from the other side, from our neighbours, France being most famous, will evaporate once we leave the transition period. And, you know, so we've got this other side of the border. So on our side of the border, we don't have the control processes in place that we need, and we're not going to anytime soon. Then the other side owned by those other countries that currently have a legal obligation to police their side of it, that obligation disappears if we do not come to an agreement before the end of the year. And then the next slide boasts this support package to boost the UK's customs sector. Again, a couple of thoughts occurs. So one, they are boasting about enlarging the customs sector. I've already covered this, haven't I? Red tape is never considered good. Enlarging the amount we need to be doing is being spun as a benefit in some special sort of crazy. Even for 2020, this is a special sort of crazy. But the second thought is, so this support package then, it has already been shown to be inadequate in protecting trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and also insufficient in helping out haulage companies that will need to trade across other borders, many of whom are at serious risk of going under next year without further support. The most useful thing in the video actually is a link to a government survey in order to tailor advice for you. Now, I've talked about these before, they've updated it, so I've put a link in the description below if you'd like to play with it yourself. So I filled it in for me, and genuine for me. In the past, when I've imagined myself as various business owners, but I actually just did it for me. And do you know what? It's quite a lot of documents to be reading through, just for little old me who doesn't go to the EU, who doesn't trade with the EU, doesn't do any of those things. A lot of things for me to read up on in terms of potential changes. And it will be an even more impressive reading list for, of course, exporters and importers and hauliers and anyone at all who trades, as well as those who provide services or even just travel regularly. You just go on holiday, particularly if you want to drive or to take a pet, something like that. Now, another point of interest, though not entirely unexpected, I suppose, is the number of documents that I did sort of have a flick through that tell you to register with European agencies. Because such was Boris Johnson's zeal for pursuing the pure Brexit, which meant zero cooperation with the EU on all matters, and yet somehow we were going to be global Britain. Oh, very important to work with every country on earth, just not in Europe. That's it. That's what Brexit is, apparently. Okay. But anyway, he ruled out staying in various European agencies and using them. We were going to make our own versions. Yes, they won't be as good and they will cost 10 times as much, which is not hyperbole, that's the actual government costings. But we certainly won't be using those nasty European systems. We will have our own British systems. So then you read these documents and it's telling people to make sure they're registered with all these European agencies. For example, importing chemicals. You will need to register with the European Chemicals Agency, it says, and this isn't just for exporting to the EU, because obviously you think, well, of course, if we're going to export to the EU, of course we can see the need to register with the European agencies. No, this is for importing in the UK as well. In fact, it even applies if you are manufacturing the chemicals in the UK for sale in the UK, so you're not actually exporting or importing at all. If it's all entirely based in the UK, you still need to register with this agency. And this is now surely, well, you think to yourself, so, okay, well, this is for now, isn't it? Because this is just the current update. So what do we do? They won't mean that. They'll mean that there is going to be the agency in place when we leave the transition period. What about that? Maybe. It doesn't mention that. It doesn't say there's going to be any change to this after the transition period. It does use the terms a lot while we're in the transition period, but it doesn't actually say anything different for when we're not in the transition period either. But there you are. Those are my thoughts on it. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.